wanted to get back to what we were talking about before, which was vendor due diligence. Before I do that, I just wanted to say it's been pretty exciting for us. There's been a lot of demand for the vendor due diligence checklist. A lot of inquiries about, we really don't understand how to use the vendor due diligence checklist. So by all means, please email me at joseph@reclamier.com. You can always fill out one of our web forms on site as well. Happy to respond in any way possible, but it's not an overly complicated form, but definitely as you get answers back from vendors, it's probably going to create more questions for you, as it should, right? When you're trying to qualify somebody that's going to be responsible for managing surplus equipment and data destruction for you. So by all means, please reach out. Like I said, we've been excited about the amount of traction that we're getting so far with the form. And like Angie and I said in the beginning of the year, we really wanted to find that additional value add. So anyway, let's get going. So if you take a look at your form, hopefully you downloaded it. If you haven't, please go and download that form today. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about 2 more elements out of the 6. The first one is data destruction, and the other one is company assurance. So data destruction is a lot more than it used to be, right? Data destruction is not just hard drives, but different types of hard drives. It's not just a destruction process, but there also has to be a way in which for the vendor to prove to you that yes, in fact, the data's been destroyed. So let's walk through what that means. First of all, there should be a documented process that the vendor is using to destroy your data. And a document like this, where they can show you a flow chart, they can show you process controls, they can demonstrate methodology for destruction, etc., and really be able to prove to you that yes, in fact, we've destroyed the data that you asked us to on your behalf. That's an element that's really important for conversation, right? The other one that you have to talk about is, do they have the expertise in all forms of data? So do they know how to get and destroy data that's on mobile devices? How are they doing that for you? Do they understand all of the implications of destroying data on MFPs, multifunctional peripherals, printers, copiers, etc.? Do they understand how to deal with old fax machines? And are they aware that there are some challenges as we get into flash drives and other types of media? So destruction as an umbrella is pretty clear, but when you get into the granularity of what that destruction is like, it gets pretty involved, and you've got to ask that question. Actually, the vendor has to be able to ask that question on your checklist. Sanitization process. So when we start talking about sanitizing drives, not physically destroying them, but sanitizing because they're going to be reused, what's the methodology that they use? But more importantly, what is the way in which they prove to you that the data has in fact been destroyed on that drive? What forensics tools do they use? What data recovery tools do they use? How do they demonstrate that they have in fact been able to sanitize that drive? And prove that to you in a report, in a physical report, they should be able to show you. In addition to that, what's the random sampling that they're doing? Reclamier doesn't do random sampling. We perform 100% QC control on all of our drives. Others perform a random sampling. Are they pulling 10%? Are they pulling 25%? What's that number? I don't know, but you've got to ask that question. Again, we go back to the destruction of the drives. So if a drive doesn't successfully wipe or it's successfully sanitized, then what does the vendor do? Do they try to wipe it again? Do they stick it in a box for a future date? Do they simply give up? I don't know, but you should ask that question because it's important to realize that if a drive fails to be sanitized, you can't prove that the data has been destroyed, then a potential risk exists for you. If you remember back in the very beginning, we talked about this vendor due diligence checklist is meant to help you assess the risk on a project as well as the risk of working with a vendor. So assessing that risk on a drive that hasn't been properly sanitized and what that destruction methodology looks like is going to be really important. And then finally, what's the certificate tell you? sometimes people will tell us, well, we got this really nice email and it said that they destroyed 800 drives. Well, 800 drives, like, what do you mean 800 drives? 800 drives, did you get serial numbers? Do you know the manufacturer of the hard drive? Do you know the PC, the laptop, or the device that the hard drive came out of? Do you know documented destruction methodology? Do you know the destruction date? How long did the drives sit in someone else's warehouse before they were destroyed? So those types of things are called out on the vendor checklist, and a reputable firm that's in this space in a professional manner can provide that information to you without hesitation. Company assurances. So we talk about company assurances from the perspective of how financially sound is the business. And you may sit back and say, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters when you think that, what if the business is not financially sound? They shutter their doors, they go out of business, and your data is now left in that warehouse, or your computer equipment, computer monitors, printers, et cetera, and so forth are left behind. You're responsible for that. Well, wait a second, I gave that to a vendor. You're right, but like we talked about in a previous segment, the ultimate liability for the disposition of the equipment and the associated destruction of data will always reside with you, the customer. It is up to you to determine, is there a vendor that you can partner with that has my best interest in mind and can provide to me the assurances, the certifications, the level of insurance necessary, etc., to protect me. That's what you have to determine. That's what your vendor due diligence checklist is meant to do for you. The other thing that we take a look at is we talk about not just the financial stability of a company, but what kind of insurance do they cover, or I should say, do they carry? We talk about pollution liability coverage. We talk about general liability, errors and omissions. We talk about automobile liability. And there's a laundry list that you'll see on the vendor due diligence checklist, as well as what we would expect those values to be. So as an example, general liability, do they have $1 million of general liability coverage? That's something that you need to consider. Getting them to issue you a certificate of insurance, naming you an additional insured, goes without question. That should be a standard. That should be part of the contract that you have between yourself and the vendor. And I think that's an interesting point that we can end on today, which is a contract. Well, if you're handling electronics recycling and data destruction on a handshake, or you're continuing to view this as e-waste or e-junk or e-whatever, I really think that you're making a mistake in the 21st century. We know that we've got anywhere from 2, 3, and 4 devices per employee. We have bring your own devices into the workplace or now working from home. We have challenges of people using equipment for a wide variety of reasons. And so this is no longer about, well, I got an old computer and I'm going to leave it out for the trash guy. Those days are really over and done with. They've been over and done with for a while. So again, I encourage you to download the vendor due diligence checklist. Like I said, we've got a lot of excitement around it. A lot of folks are interested. If you've got any questions where you're reading down through it and you just don't understand how a particular element works with another, or what's that level of insurance really look like? What should we be doing in our business? How do I know that the vendor's really telling me the truth? What do I do in order to make sure that the documentation is clear? Simply reach out to me in the form of an email. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. It's not going to be a sales call for you. It's about education and awareness. So we've got 2 more elements that we're going to be going over the next time we get together. One is environmental and export compliance, and the other one is subcontractors, partners, and downstream vendors. I think once we wrap all of that together, you can see how they're related, and you really have to have all 6 when you're going to qualify that vendor. So again, check it out. Download the vendor due diligence checklist. If you have any questions in the meantime, just reach out to me. I'm happy to answer those for you, and we'll be following up shortly with the next 2 elements on the vendor due diligence checklist.